certainly relating to ethics and integrity, you have a broader responsibility. This is one that I really kind of enjoy because I think it's really important, and this is about leaders, and again, doesn't matter how many people you supervise. So, 3 levels of ethical responsibility are what you do yourself, right? I mean, decisions you make, how you conduct yourself, how you do it, whatever, that's pretty straightforward. You're responsible for yourself. But then there are 2 others. The second one is what other people did that you knew about, okay? The third one is really tough, particularly the higher up you get in an organization, is as a leader you're responsible for what other people did that you didn't know about. So you're responsible for things you did not even know about. That doesn't sound too fair, does it? Well, first of all, again, the first one is pretty straightforward. The second one, and what I'm going to suggest to you, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit more in just a couple of minutes, is the secondary consequence of somebody doing the wrong thing. So whether you're a leader or not, once you know somebody else has done something wrong, what you do or don't do about that suddenly becomes your problem. You don't want it to be your problem, maybe, but it suddenly becomes your problem. And certainly as a leader, if something is brought to your attention, I mean, again, the head football coach at Penn State, and not to beat up on Penn State, it's just I've been teaching this for years, and that's just the latest example of, the head football coach didn't molest anybody, the business manager didn't molest anybody, the athletic director didn't molest anybody, I guess, I hope so, and the president of college probably didn't either, but they knew something was going on, or should have known something was going on, and now they're, are they almost as viewed as guilty as the alleged perpetrator of these heinous crimes? Absolutely. And all of you, as people in an organization, you will know things that are happening, and you can lose your job, not for having done anything wrong, but not for having confronted wrongdoing, whether you're a supervisor or you're not, and you need to think about that. And then, of course, the hardest thing for a leader is not knowing. There are lots of, yes, please.
The third one has been in the news a lot, and that's where parents, their kids have sleepovers, their friends over, and they get arrested, called to jail because their kids or their kids' friends brought drugs, alcohol, whatever in, and they didn't know about it, they didn't see it, they weren't aware of it, and they're actually having to go to jail. There's been cases in the news about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the example of when parents, they're responsible for young people and they may not be aware of something that's going on in a party or whatever, and they're held responsible. That's really the same corollary, really is. It's basically you have to do your due diligence. I mean, you have to at least have tried to be informed. You have to take responsibility. Now, if they did everything they could to know what was going on at that party or whatever, that's probably their best defense. But if they were lackadaisical, not paying attention, not concerned, and the same thing with leaders. If leaders got their office door closed all the time, they never ask any questions, people, they have the reputation of not wanting to hear bad news, so they don't want people to come and tell them about bad news. They get upset if they hear about bad news, so things get stifled. That is not good. And as we just talked about earlier in the presentation, if you don't do any preventative work in advance, where you've tried to do something to make sure there aren't ethical problems, you can get yourself into a situation. Now, if something happened that goes sideways, you knew nothing about, like the city manager and this purchasing person, or excuse me, the IT person who bought all this personal stuff on their own, well, if they did make ethics and integrity an issue that was talked about, they were open to hearing input. They were, did encourage people to report when they saw wrongdoing. Then those are all appropriate responses to that. Because it'll always be, any size organization, there's always going to be somebody who makes some bad choices, something's gone sideways in their lives or whatever, and you will not always know that. But if you can't say that you've done all you can to be aware and to deal with those, that's when you can run into a problem. This is one I really would like to emphasize is as I just said a moment ago, there will always be things that come up because you can't control everybody's behavior. You can't be aware of everybody's behavior all the time. But anybody here ever hear Watergate? You know, what was Watergate about? Watergate was much more about the cover-up than it was. And there are Watergates. This is filled with Watergates. It's a secondary scandal. It's what happened, but then was it covered up? Was it responded to? Were people honest about it? That's really what it comes down to. And oftentimes there can be a greater scandal about not being forthright about something. I mean, the worst example as a city manager, and it's particularly a big deal with police officers as an example, but you're all in, I think most of you are in quasi-law enforcement kind of responsibilities, is you can have a police officer who's driving down, maybe they get a little sleepy late at night, early in the morning, and they run into the median or something on, in the roadway, and they mess up the car or whatever. But not so badly they can't drive it back. So they drive, and this, I won't say if this is Carrie's here, I won't say if this is a real example or not, but they drive it back, and the next person uses the car, says his car is all bashed up on the bottom and whatever. And if they say, if they had taken the car in and said, I screwed up, I ran into the barrier and I screwed up the car, what's going to happen to them? They're going to get some sort of discipline, right? And they better not do it 3 or 4 more times, right? What happens if the police officer lies about it and says, I don't know what happened, I didn't do it, didn't happen on my watch? Yeah, then you lose your job. Then you lose your job. So you take a situation that's embarrassing, you know it's going to cause you some grief, but you can't help yourself but making it into a situation that's going to have much greater consequence, and you're going to be fired. And again, I mean, lots of examples of that. So if there's a problem, if you screw up and you make a mistake, or your organization makes a mistake, I mean, and when I ran into that problem as a city manager, the best thing for me to do was just whoever I need to know, just tell them it happened. Just tell them it happened. We're embarrassed by what happened, but this is why it happened. This is what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again, and we're going to fix this situation. We're just going to do it, just going to take care of it. But the more you kind of say, oh, okay, no one's going to find out about it, maybe we can kind of, gloss this thing over, maybe we can kind of not really tell folks about it. I tell you, working for a city council, if they hear about a problem from somebody else other than the person who's working for them, you got yourself into a big problem. And that's really, with everybody who's got a supervisor, and we all have some kind of supervisor, that's really the case. They better hear it from you first off, straight ahead, no varnishing, no fooling around, and just take responsibility. Because covering up, either individually or as an organization, will cause you more trouble than, always cause you more trouble. And again, people have much greater consequence for the secondary effects. And what I like to say is don't turn an honest mistake into an ethical scandal. Don't turn an honest mistake into an ethical scandal. You're not perfect. You will make mistakes. I don't mean to sound like I even need to tell you this, but it's hard to do sometimes. Just own up to it. Get it out there. Take your penance, whatever it has to be, and move on. But if you try to fudge it and you lose your credibility, people don't think you're honest any longer, then it's much greater. Whose responsibility is it in regard to ethics and integrity if there's a problem of some sort? If you know something happened, it's your problem. Again, it may not be right, it may not be fair, it may cause you problems, but if you know about a problem, you've got to do something about it. Now, what you're required to do depends on the circumstances. And I'm not saying that each of you has to be the conscience for everybody else you work with, okay? But, there are clearly circumstances where you haven't done anything wrong, but you know something wrong has happened, and you know, or you should know, you'll be held accountable for knowing and not having done anything about it, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So, again, you don't have to be the Lone Ranger in your organization where you're always looking for anybody who might do anything a little differently than you might do it, and then you have to report them to somebody for having done something a little different. I'm not saying taking it to that extreme, but if you think you can see somebody taking public equipment and using it for their personal use, a coworker, or taking the vehicle and taking it home when they clearly can't take it home or whatever, if you know about it, you're going to be messed up if you don't do anything about it. And it's a terrible situation because you don't want to be, use tattletale. There can be worse terms than that. But you don't want that reputation. But it's like, when you're asked, well, did you know about it? Yeah, I didn't. Oh, you knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. You didn't do anything about it. That's a problem. That's a problem. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but when there's as I said earlier in the presentation, when there's an ethical problem, there are few things worse that can happen to an organization. Because there's nothing much worse to an individual than your honesty being challenged. I mean, your competency, again, your IQ, whatever. I mean, they can challenge me in all those kind of areas, but don't challenge honesty. And that's, I think, the way most people feel. Same with your organization. Your organizations are imperfect. People are imperfect. But if you end up with a challenge, and I'm not sure what just happened, but you end up with a challenge, then that's going to be a difficult situation. All right. I'll just make up the rest of it. So. It's probably, yeah. All right. Well, let me tell you what I think the next slide is. And it's the thing that, do any of you ever get calls from the press about anything you do? Well, someday you may if you haven't yet. And just ignore the screen. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. All right. Do any of you know, and again, this is filled with it, and just think about, poor Penn State or whatever. What are the 3 questions? That's another thing when you're dealing with a problem, whether it's your supervisor, whether it's your city attorney or your county council or the district attorney, or whether it's, again, the press or whatever. There are 3 questions that they teach the press in Journalism 101. Whenever there's a problem that's come up, there are 3 questions. Okay, anybody know what the 3 questions are? All right, remember these questions because you will be asked these questions. If there's a problem in your organization or in your work group and the press gets to talk to you, they will ask you these 3 questions. The 3 questions are, 1, what did you know? What did you know about, this alleged da-da-da-da-da-da? Second question is, when did you know it? And the third question is, what did you do about it? Again, nothing you did personally, but what you're going to be held accountable for is what did you know? Did you know this was going on? Hey, Harvey, did you know this was going on? Oh, by the way, how long? Okay, you did. How long? Did you just find out about it? Or no, I've known this for a couple of years. Oh, okay. That's kind of a different situation. 2 days ago versus 2 years ago. How long did you know? And what did you do about it? Well, I didn't want to cause a problem. I didn't want to, oh, we got it back. All right. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. All right. Hey, I remember it, Those are the 3 questions. Those are the questions you have to ask yourself if you're confronted with a situation. Again, something you've done, something a coworker's done, something that, somebody, so-and-so company wants to give you a few extra bucks on the side. I mean, not only do you not take that, but you've got to report it. And the really bad part about all this is all of a sudden you're in a situation where you have to do something that puts you in an uncomfortable situation because somebody else has screwed up. But you don't have a choice. Life isn't fair at times. You don't have a choice. I've got to figure out how to end this thing up on a more uplifting note, I think. All right. Can I read you? That's the presentation. Anything you want to ask about, challenge me about, or anything on that part of the presentation. I do want to do a case study before we wrap up. We will get out of here before 5. So will you humor me with a case study? Or are you all going to run for the door? All right. All right. Because Bob is a good study. But anything you want to ask about the presentations so far? Did any make any sense to you? Am I trying to make ethics less boring than you thought it would be when you walked in? All right. All right. Hopefully so. All right. Here's Bob. Okay, I worked, as you heard, I'm sure you memorized my, my bio. So you'll know that I worked for Campbell, and I worked for Mountain View. So this is the city of Campbellview. This is a story of the city of Campbellview. So just listen to this, and then we're going to use those fancy little gadgets to help give us the right answer to this question, okay? Okay, this is, the name of it is Bob, the go-to employee, okay? Bob is one of the most trustworthy and reliable employees in the city of Campbellview Public Works Department. During a major winter storm, the Campbellview Creek was threatening to overflow its banks and potentially flood the downtown area. Since Bob was his most reliable employee, the Public Works Maintenance Supervisor selected Bob to undertake a critical assignment. He was directed to go to the county's central sandbag distribution site and pick up a large quantity of sandbags to help protect the downtown from flooding. He was told that it was critical that he return with the sandbags within 2 hours in order to allow their placement prior to the anticipated high tide, the greatest period of risk. Bob immediately drove to the sandbag distribution site, but he was dismayed to find a large quantity of trucks ahead of him. After being there a few minutes and seeing how slowly the line was moving, he concluded it was unlikely that he would be able to get the needed sandbags and return to Campbellview in time to protect the downtown area prior to the high tide. However, after being in line a short time, he observed several trucks pull out of line and around the back of the sandbag facility and then leave. After making some discreet inquiries, he learned that if the sandbag distribution foreman was given $100 cash, that you could bring your truck around the back and obtain the sandbags immediately. He quickly decided to pull around back, provide the foreman the required $100, and obtain the sandbags. He did so and returned to Campbellview in time for the sandbags to be installed prior to the high tide. He was praised by the maintenance supervisor for coming through once again. However, once Bob submitted a reimbursement request for $100 and told the supervisor what it was for, the supervisor was very upset. In fact, he notified Bob that he would be filing charges of misconduct against him. Bob was astonished by this turn of events and immediately contacted the Public Works Director to let him know that he felt he was being unfairly treated. Okay, so you're the director. Do you conclude that Bob did what was needed to complete his assignments on time and to help protect the community? Do you conclude that Bob is guilty of misconduct? Are you going to give him the $100 back? What are you going to do? So,
Ready?
you ready with your little gizmos? You got to get your gizmos. All right.
Let's try it again.
All right.
Sorry.
Can we do it again?
Yes.
All right, so Bob did the right thing. I mean, he saved the community from flooding. Yes is he did the right thing. No is he did the wrong thing.
Okay, here we go.
Wow, that's a pretty good split. Pretty good split, and it's legitimate. So 38% thought he did the right thing, and 63% thought he did the wrong thing. So who would like to defend Bob and say he did the right thing? Yes. He wasn't trying to be dishonest, right? He wasn't dishonest about it. He freely admitted what he had done. That's certainly a mitigating circumstance. Right, right. Right. Yeah, yeah. He didn't cover it up. How about the other side of the argument? Who wants to say why Bob? Yeah.
What if he paid and then reported it? Like, this guy's doing this, but I'm going to talk to this for by just saying that this is what is happening.
Yeah, No, that might have been a mitigating circumstance. I mean, the scary thing is if this sandbag facility was a public facility, you actually probably committed a crime by bribing a public employee. You know, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. Why is it a tough situation? Pardon? Public safety. Right. It's tough. And oftentimes you'll be confronted with situations that are tough situations. Yes, in the back. Yeah.
But if the person who was already resources knew that this was not happening there, then they would make the call out, we need more resources, we need more sandbags, and then they could follow the right process.
Yeah.
So instead of just farming that process.
Yeah.
Not the resource back, it's the time back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he didn't try not, he came up front and he said, hey, I paid these guys.
He was honest. Yeah. I mean, his motivation was a good motivation. He didn't do this to personally benefit himself. I mean, he didn't try to hide it. And the reason it's difficult is you've got a conflict of two important values, right? You got the value of public service, protecting the community, getting the job. You know, Bob's always been praised for getting the job done, getting good service out there, doing what needs to be done. And then you've got, yeah, I mean, it's the act itself is not ethical. It could be illegal. And while he was, you know, pure of purpose, you don't know if there was a whole bunch of trucks in front of him in the line that had a more dire situation to deal with. So at the end of the day, and all the responses are good, and all the responses have some good, you know, obviously some good points. At the end of the day, you can't say that what he did was ethical. His biggest problem was not having a cell phone to call up a supervisor and find out what to do. But that's the whole point of the case study, is to realize that you'll be dealing with some situations that can be tough calls, that there's something to be lost or gained by what you do. And try not to make snap decisions. Try to think it through. Try to really decide what's right, and think about all the factors we kind of talked about, all the criteria to talk about, and think about how that happens. Because, yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy. You're not supposed to steal money from the cash register in your offices or something, but you know, most people get themselves into trouble in areas that are much more gray than that. And so I just encourage you to be aware of those gray areas, and you got to think about it, and you got to kind of work yourself through those issues. So let me show. The next slide has a couple of. Oh yes, please.
I guess for me, where the ethical thing came in, if this had been a business he went to, and there was here's the free sandbags line, and here's the shorter line if you pay whatever it is for the sandbags.
Everybody knows about it.
Express line.
It's out in the public. It's clear. Yeah. Yeah. That's up to the business to do that, but that would be a different situation. That's not bribery to pay an additional amount for some expedited service or something such as that. Yeah. The next slide is just some resources. I think it is. Oh, key thoughts. All right. Got to hear me just a little bit more. Can't be an effective leader unless you demonstrate ethics and integrity. Talked about the rationalization. If you're in charge of whatever size group, it's your responsibility. Again, not finding out, no one finding out is not a criteria. Newspaper rule, taxpayer rule, etc. Some wonderful web resources. Well, I have a kind of bias. When I first put that on here, I wasn't working for these people. So International City County Management Association, ICMA.org, has a lot of great stuff on ethics. Could be a good resource for you if you try to do some stuff back in your organization. Institute for Local Government here in California, another great resource. And if you want to take advantage of that, I think that would be great. So it's 4:45. I'd be happy to answer any questions for the group or individually. The bottom line is, if you got out of this session just a few things to think about in regard to the topic, maybe a better feeling of why it's important for you, why you need to take some time on it, reflect on it as an organization, maybe how to deal with some of the challenges you will confront from time to time, then I feel good, and hopefully it's been a good use of your time. Thank you very much.